Okay, we've just gone 7 o'clock, so I would like to welcome everybody on channel. I'm going to switch on the repeater network as well and welcome everybody on a frequency. We're about to commence with the Power Hour Tech Talk. My name is Keith, ZS6HI, and I will be your host for this evening, but I'm not the VIP guest. Our VIP guest will be Keegan, ZU6KEA, and Albert, ZS6AHY. They'll be our special guests tonight to take us through DMR. Before we commence, I'd just like to remind everybody that our next Power Hour Tech Talk will be on the 29th of April, and that'll be on top band, 160 meter top band. So please do diarize to join us on the 29th of April, and that'll be followed by a Power Hour Tech Talk on the 27th of May on end-fed half-wave antenna and all the myths and stories around the end-fed half-wave antenna on the 27th of May. So please diarize those dates now, and we'll keep you posted closer to the time. As mentioned, our special guest is Keegan, ZU6KEA tonight, and I'm going to just do a quick intro about Keegan from his QRZ.com page, worth having a look at. So Keegan was born in 2005 in Sunnyside, and he was tested positive for autistic spectrum. He contracted malaria in 2013 and survived. So he's gone through a little bit of trauma, has Keegan. He got interested in ham radio and electronics around 2016, and he's often disassembled lots of electronic components. And I think it might be the case for many of us, Keegan. So welcome to the party. The first person who got Keegan into ham radio was Johan, ZS6 Alpha Fox. And then that was when he was 18 years old and with the Lofelder radio team. And he'd like to say special thanks to Philip, ZS6 Fox Yankee, and Helgi, ZS6 Hotel Bravo, who have also helped him and mentored him through his skills. And he's also interested in VHF and UHF, but tonight Keegan is here to talk to us all about DMR. So at this point, I'm going to mute Keegan and turn off my camera, and it is over to you. I do understand that Keegan has requested that everyone hold their questions to the end of the presentation. So please just take your questions, mark your questions down, and please post them in the chat, and we will take questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you, Keegan. Over to you.
Thanks, Zulu Series 6 Hotel India. And yeah, this is going to be the presentation about DMR. I discovered when I was 18, when I was listening around. We all do that once in a while, and I just got interested. I was quite curious. Um, but I'm going to talk about how I actually found DMR. It was a little bit interesting story before I continue. So during my scholarship at Uplands College, I was doing the Duke of Edinburgh President's Award. One of my requirements was to learn a new skill. And for example, getting your driver's license or getting your amateur radio license says that you accomplished something. So I did my radio amateur license because I want to learn something a bit new. And I eventually got it when I matriculated from Uplands. And ever since, I've been just learning new things as time goes on. During my time at Uplands, I was the sound crew leader. As you can see there, next to the digital mixer, I had my Anytone 878 on the corner when I just got it brand new. But it was quite of an interesting step. Even audio wise, DMR actually quite impressed me with the audio quality, and I even use this desk to see the difference between FM and DMR, and I couldn't really tell. But the audio quality is amazing through this. On HF, I usually struggle because of the noise, but DMR suppresses the noise, so it really makes it easy to make QSOs. So one thing I want to talk about with DMR is the evolution to it. This picture I have in front of you was before computers were made. IT or information technology is basically how we work information. It's like taking paper of information, grabbing a radio, say what you need, the other person had to hear it, and the list goes on. With analog, with almost everyone knows analog, you get quite a bit of challenges. You get some noise, you get few other diddly strats and that. Like, for example, if you go at a far distance, well, a very far distance, you might have a problem of making a QSO and so forth. And then you have to have like a pen and paper if you can't remember absolutely 100%. DMR was quite different. DMR has a lot of information technology to it. One of the shifts to instead of analog from digital is that with digital we shift to metadata. Unlike analog such as SSB or FM, which is strictly voice over air, DMR treats the transmissions as data packets. It allows the radio to carry data alongside voice, such as talk group name and call sign. The nice thing about this, it has an automated information management like a digital logbook, which eliminates the need of a pen and paper logging, such as this Anytone D890 over here. When you're transmitting, it will show you the last person who called you, which I find very important. As one time I had an emergency. Well, I didn't have an emergency. I was at George. Someone was skydiving and hit the wall, and I couldn't figure out who to talk to because my notepad went away. But the nice thing about DMR, you have a list in it, so you have a nice call book and it remembers the last call, so you don't need to memorize or have a notepad with you. Built-in contact database, that's the thing that I'm talking about a bit. It's like it holds like 1,000 contacts to it that essentially acts like who's who of the amateur radio world. There's also, with most DMR radios, you get APRS, like an integrated GPS, which moves beyond vague signal reports, or you can coordinate directly. This is a very nice feature. Like, for example, if you're in an emergency, you can send your GPS instead of giving a vague description. If I would drop you in the middle of nowhere, it's actually quite difficult to explain everything around you and try to make a picture of where you might be, and then the other person have to figure it out. APRS, well, changes that because you can put on a map and you can see where you are. That's the nice thing about DMR is that instant access to your GPS location if you want to configure it that way. Web linking mapping, that's a thing I'm talking about with APRS. As you send your location, you can view it on, for example, APRS.fi, providing real-time pinpoint accuracy for example, search and rescue or simple tracking. So this is the context of tonight. It's going to be the original growth. So how DMR got into the works here in South Africa, DMR versus analog, how a DMR transceiver works, DMR repeater versus analog repeater. SFR is a cool feature. It's your single frequency repeater. Going to tell you how to register for your DMR ID. And then the interaction will be the programming. So we'll show some tips on that, including hotspot setups. There will be what we did not cover, my references, my AI declaration, and credits and big thanks too. On to original and growth. So DMR was established around 2005, 2006 from Europe. It was initially designed for professional uses such as security and logistics. Around 2009, 2011, it gained popularity within the amateur radio community, particularly through the DMR MAC, Digital Mobile Radio Motorola Amateur Radio Club. Before Brandmaster was made, uh, we all radio amateur DMR networks were using MAC, MR, MRCs, Motorola Amateur Radio Club links to speak. The TYT boom around 2014 to 2016 was the introduction of affordable DMR handhelds. Back in the day, the only thing you can get your hands on from DMR is commercial grade equipment. And even today, that equipment is quite pricey. And TYT, or formerly Tetra, like, makes quite a good amount of products. And on top of that, affordable products such as DMR handouts, such as the MD380, the MD390, dramatically lowering the entry barrier. This lead to a rapid growth in DMR usage among South Africa radio amateurs and worldwide. For South Africa, this talking about when Brandmaster went in, the radio ID system is 655. So when you get your DMR ID, it will be 655 something something. And almost every talk group will be 655 as recognition as a prefix assigned to all radio IDs. After a while came the multi-mode period. DMR operators onside other digital amateur radio systems such as D-Star and ASU System Fusion linked together in a way. It's quite complicated, but some clever people came in and managed to link it up, which makes DMR able to talk to D-Star and so forth and so on. There's even a analog network in South Africa that you can use your DMR radio to talk to, which arguably has the largest active user base and repeater footprint because of this system, largely due to the equipment affordability, strong network, and a wide repeater development. Not all areas, but most areas, especially around Gauteng and that area, there's a lot of DMR repeaters and digital networks available for users to use. On to the to continue, Brandmaster and the network consideration, about 2016 onwards. DMR, well, Brandmaster became to replace DMR Mac as the preferred backbone. It's more open, has a more flexible architecture, makes it easier for talk group management and better support for experimentation, such as making your own repeater or hotspot. ZS repeaters increasingly mitigated to or integrated with Brandmaster, enabling ZS-wide talk groups with reliable international linking and better scalability. Now we're going to talk about DMR and analog. Both are nice, but I think DMR has some very nice features on its sleeve. The the disadvantage about your analog radio, according to this graph here, is that over a certain level, the audio quality gets a bit sticky and starts to go down. The nice thing about DMR, it has error correction built into it. So it's clear until the very edge of the range. That's when it starts to get a 15% data loss. It couldn't remake all the packets, so it cuts out. The the disadvantage about analog radios, you can only have one compensation per channel. Let's say 12.5 kilohertz. The nice thing about DMR, it uses the same bandwidth as narrow analog, but you can have two compensations per channel, and that's through TDMA or forgot the name, but oh, I got it now. Time division multiple access. This technology is also used in the phone network. I think at the 2G networks it was implemented, but it's implemented in DMR. So unlike analog, where you just have this whole time and this 12.5 kilohertz channel, the nice thing about DMR, it splits it. It splits it into two slots, so you get slot one and slot two. This is more or less 30 milliseconds from each other, but the nice part is that you can have two compensations per channel. The additional advantage of that is your battery lasts about 40% longer because you're not transmitting constantly. You are only transmitting about half the time. So your battery will actually last much longer compared to a analog radio. With a analog radio, you are limited to voice only. With DMR, you have text. You can actually SMS each other. You can use your GPS and you can add telemetry such as APRS, and the list goes on. So next is how a DMR transceiver works. So we have our microphone input. We have an analog to digital converter. It goes to our vocoder processor. This gives voice compression and noise suppression. So you will notice with a DMR network, it's preferred in industrial sites because it has that noise suppression on it. So if you're close to a loud machine, it can suppress that noise. Although it's limiting, it is a massive improvement, nonetheless. And then after that, it gets processed into data factorization and frame assembly, including error correction codes, talk ID, or for example, your GPS data. Then it goes to the modulator, and then it goes into framing and timing. So your slot one or your slot two, then it goes to the power circuitry, and then comes out to the antenna. And then the receiver function is the opposite way around. You receive the audio, it gets demodulated, packet recovery, and error correction, and then back to your vocoder, and then to your digital to analog converter. That's your basic function block of a DMR radio. But there's some interesting facts about this process. So with human hearing, it's around about 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz or 20 kilohertz. DMR from my testing from a parametric EQ, this fancy device, Allen and Health Q16 that I've been using at school. I plugged in my radio into it because I was curious about the audio bandwidth, and that's what I came up with. So 30 hertz will be about in between this 250 50, and 3.4 kilohertz is between the 2 and 5 kilohertz on the screen. The other interesting fact is the compression. Do I have it here? No, I do not know what happened to that. But seems like I missed a slide. But when with DMR, it's like a computer. It has to compress that data much smaller. And the nice thing about compressing that data is that you can fit more information out at a limited output. It's like getting more pressure at a pipe that has a thin dimension. You're getting more out of it. The next thing we're going to speak about is DMR repeaters and analog repeaters. With analog, this is an example. If you have two radios and the one who has the strongest transmission to the repeater will be heard first. Sometimes it might have a clash and it might retransmit noise. The nice thing about the DMR repeater has two features. One, only one radio can transmit at the time. The repeater decides which radio to take, unlike an analog repeater where it could be any radio. Usually it's the strongest radio with the most power. With DMR, it's all the repeater decides. So when you transmit, you give it a wake-up call. The repeater clicks in and says, "Okay, I got you. I will transmit back to you saying that you can access this repeater. If you try to transmit on this repeater on another radio, you'll get a busy tone as you can't transmit as another radio is in the use of it." The additional nice feature about DMR repeaters, you get color codes. And the nice thing about that, you can have multiple repeaters in line of sight. But if you want to separate them all, you can give them different color codes. And you'll have no problems with interference or communication errors. In this slot here, I also added get slot 2. This won't usually happen on the DMR networks that we have, but on the commercial sites, where if time slot 1 is busy and you try to transmit at time slot 1, it will request to slot 2 instead, saying you can still use the network, but you're going to be transferred while you can only use time slot 2. Another thing is with DMR, you can have single frequency repeaters or SFR. So with the SFR repeater, it listens and transmits at the same time, but it's not how you think. So if I go back at my slides, TDMA, the advantage of DMR is that you have these two slots, slot 1 and slot 2. With a single frequency repeater or SFR, you're using one slot to listen and the other slot to transmit. So you can have two radios using one frequency, and you can have a repeater that can transmit at one frequency. To give you a demonstration, I have my Anytone radio with me, and I'm going to show you FSR in real time. Let me enable my webcam. So this is my Anytone mobile. It's currently set up in SFR, and I have two radios. If I transmit on one radio, let me try that. Oh, there we go. If I transmit on one radio, you can see there's a D code. And if I transmit on the other radio, it's there. And to prove it's FSR, I'm going to switch this off. Okay, and if I transmit, the other radio doesn't decode. That because it requires the repeater to be on. And that's just through a single frequency we can do that. So we're using, for example, in this example, I'm using, it's the opposite way around of this, but in basic terms, you're using a slot, like slot 1, the repeater, the FSR repeater takes it and retransmits it as slot 2. You can configure your radio that it can work directly with the other radio with or without the repeater in both ways, but that takes a bit of steps to that. For registration, if you're interested in DMR, the one thing you need to do is to get your DMR ID. So you need to go, well, firstly, you have to have a valid call sign. Oops. You have to have a valid call sign, passing the RAE and obtaining your ICASA license. Then you have to visit radioid.net, the global registration database. You'll create your account with your email and password, and then you'll submit your user registration with your call sign and South African address. Then you will upload your CASA license for a manual volunteer verification, and then you will receive your 7-digit ID after approval within 24 to 48 hours. And you thought we were close? We're not almost there yet. So, next thing is programming. Think the most people struggle at is setting up their hotspots or setting up their radio. The nice thing about DMR, you can set up your radio in many ways. In fact, I've seen a lot of different users how they set up their radios. You may be, for example, I know ZS6 Alpha Fox. He has everything on his radio, every talk group on there. Every channel has its own talk group. You can do something like that if you're going to make it like a hotspot only radio, but eventually you're going to run out of channels on that radio or memory on that radio. So I made a simple graph of how to implement your code plug. One of the things that you think about is what your basic needs, what needs to be done. For example, your simplex. For example, I'm not talking about simplex as in your hotspots and your FSRs. I'm talking about, for example, on your DMR radio, you might want to have a few channels like a simplex chat and that stuff. You might even, like, for example, in my case, I have some channels where I have my simplex repeater on memory so that I can simply just turn on my mobile radio when I need it, and I have it right on my radio when I need it without configuration at all. The second thing you have to think is how am I going to structure it? The nice thing with DMR, it gives you zones. Some people would zone them, like, for example, I have a zone for my hotspot. A zone is basically where all your channels is going to be grouped in. It's basically a subfolder if you really think about it, where you access the rest of the important channels. So, in like for example, in my case, I categorize it by areas. So I have one for Nelspruit here, I have one for outside of Nelspruit, like Limpopo, Gauteng, Pretoria, Western Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, the list goes on. I even have a dedicated zone for repeaters, but that all depends how you want to structure it. Most people struggle or get confused or get scared about this phase, but the nice thing about programming and making your own code plug is that you personalize it to yourself. If you feel like you're becoming a slave to the radio, well, you simply haven't optimized your programming to it, or you copied someone else's code plug and you're wondering why it isn't working for you, because it isn't working for you. Those people optimize their code plugs to help themselves. For example, my null sprayed zone, I have my simplex contacts first. Then after that, I have my most important hotspot functions, such as my Cyvcare worldwide chat, my disconnect, and a few others. I then program a lot of channels to have different talk groups. I just put in what I need, and if I need anything else, I have a channel dedicated where I can use my logbook and manually put in a talk group from there. After you figure out your zones, you have to think of what additions should I add, such as your repeaters or local. So you look when I'm talking about local, I'm talking about in your area. For example, there might be a repeater you like, or there might be a particular simplex frequency that people like to talk to at particular times that you might be interested, that you'll be adding to channels and you'll be zoning it. Then additional will be your hotspots and DMR repeaters. Some people would like to make dedicated zones for repeaters. Like, for example, they might have a Pretoria repeater that they particularly like, and they put in the talk groups that they want to use on their in separate channels to make it easier for them to scroll instead of manually putting one into the channel. Then after that is your technical editing and additions. So when you structured everything, you might have to go backwards a bit. Your technical editing and additions is, for example, when you add functionality such as APRS to it, GPS, maybe, for example, you do mountain biking, that what I did at school, and I bought the Anytone radio for the man down function. It basically detects if you at a particular angle for a long period of time, it will give you a warning, and after some time, it does an alarm, which is quite a nice feature. For example, if you're doing any kind of outdoor sports or hiking and that, even though if you're unconscious, your radio can still save you. Alongside of some editing and additions. And then you have to validate. Validate is where you basically take your radio out and test that everything is working. So I will show a example. This is for the Anytone D890. These are my channels here and my simple stuff up here, such as my simplex, now my DMR simplex, my APRS. I have two spares in case I need to set up something temporary, including two analog spares and my SFR repeaters here. And then I also have my crossband repeater available. Then Cops Hoop will be my repeater at my location alongside other stuff. Let me scroll down a bit. So I actually categorize this quite well. Always start at a zero number such as 60, 30, 50, etc. At Then I have my hotspot stuff, my As I said, I had a particular channel where I could put in any kind of contact. For example, I have Parrot on here, ZS repeater network, DMR disconnect 655 UK and worldwide. Then I have my DMR repeaters down here that I use when I go to Pretoria. That's there. And then on the side, you have your zones. You have your zones such as I showed here, I have in Mpumalanga, Limpopo. With my repeaters, I put in a DMR repeater zone, including one dedicated in Johannesburg, and you can ignore the last one. That's to do with the dual. The the D890 has next edge also, so it's actually a multi-digital radio. Another thing is scan list. You can be a bit creative with that. Essentially, a scan list is basically a list that just, well, if you have, like, for example, a lot of repeaters and you do not want to transmit and save your battery, you can use a scan list. You can even configure it that if you go on a particular channel, it will automatically turn that on. That's a nice feature about Anytone. And then you have your preferred SMS. This is your short SMSs. You can type on the keypad, but that will take you forever to type a message. So you also have the option of having some pre-made text. For example, my location is on aprs.fi, send help, send I sent my GPS, and then your optional settings. I think that woke up some people. Your optional settings, if I go back to the PowerPoint, is your technical and editing additions. So that will be if you, for example, some DMR radios have Bluetooth, some of them don't. In this case, my Anytone radio has Bluetooth. I can use my phone or I could use a car radio with the PPT button. You also have a power save function that's more to do with its receiving key functions, other digital functions. A quick note is that with your SMS format, the DMR network is most preferably likes MSMS or Motorola SMS. There's on this Anytone, you also have the option of Hyteria SMS or DMR standard. But to use, if you're using, for example, your GPS or APRS, it's a good thing to set your SMS format to MSMS. Audio records, this one has a record function, GPS and ranging, display, etc. That will be your nitty-gritty small details to add. You have an alarm setting. This alarm setting is you can play around with this if you want to. No longer mountain bike, so I no longer use this emergency setting here. Also get hotkeys and APRS. With setting up your APRS, down here isn't quite important, but up here is. You could choose a particular channel. For example, if you have a particular channel where you want to use APRS a bit differently, you can select that here, or you can select current channel. Then you select the slot. In South Africa, it's slot 1 that we transmit data. Slot 2 will be your voice, and your slot 1 will be your data. And you report it at 655, well, 655,999 as a private call. If you, for example, I'm not too sure with simplex if you doing simplex how that will be, but I think it's slot 2 for data as you're using slot 1 for voice. Okay. Then on side of the other stuff, your master ID, well, you will have a radio ID. For example, here I have a few IDs here. I have my ID up there, someone else's ID, etc. The most important thing is putting your ID there so you can able to use the network. Then your contacts. The next is your contact or your talk groups. So, for example, with my radio, I have some private calls and some group calls. What is the major difference? A group call is that anyone can be involved. So it's like this TikTok now, anyone can be involved. But if I grab my phone and call, for example, Albert Z6AHY, you guys wouldn't hear that phone call. And that's the nice thing about private call. You can, with the DMR network, you can privately talk to an individual by using private call. So, like, for example, I have a few contacts that are private calls, and some I have my group chats. I don't have much because I knew which talk groups I like to use. Some others will have this list full to the bottom or almost there. Roaming channel, with DMR, I think it's specifically with DMR 2 and 3. I don't think it's DMR 1. Isn't such a thing that you should worry about, but with your DMR radios, you get roaming. So in the IT basics of roaming, it's basically where you have multiple access points, for example, multiple repeaters, and you want to find the closest repeater. Your radio has a roaming function, and what basically it does, it asks everything that you put in there and says, "Are you available? Are you available?" And the radio works itself out, which is the closest and the available repeater, and it will automatically give you that repeater. So it's actually quite nice around Gauteng if you're going between Pretoria and deep in some areas where the repeaters change all the time and you might can't access the other repeater and you get a repeater not available warning on your radio. So roaming helps with that. It's very similar to quite a lot of technologies, but that what roaming does, it finds the closest repeater available and takes you to that. This is only for DMR, not for analog. And then you can have a roaming zone. So you might have one for Pretoria, Gauteng, Western Cape. Maybe you go to the UK, you might have a particular area that has a lot of repeaters. You can also section that here with roaming zones. You'll receive group call lists. This is most people, if you're able to get in and you can't hear anything out, your most important thing that you forgot is to set up your receive group call lists. As I said, with the way you design your code plug, the program on your radio, you can do it however you want. The way I set up mine is very open. Uh, I don't mean open as an open. I'm talking about it's open as if it receives something, it just decodes it almost immediately, no questions asked. But some people may not want that. They may want to only listen to a particular talk group. So they might have RSA South Africa, UK, etc., 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 to separate and filter. That's that's true if you have a particular feature off on your Anytone radio digi monitor. If you have that off, that becomes true. If you have that on, that becomes false because digi monitor decodes anything, no matter what context it is, unless it's encrypted, which I hope that you're not using encryption on a DMR network because you're not allowed to do encryption in South Africa as a radio amateur. You also have your digital contact list. I'm not going to open this, or else my computer might have a freeze. But basically, this is your contacts that you can load from radio ID onto the radio. So even if you don't have their call sign on your radio, it can detect their ID and convert it into a call sign that you can see on your radio. You also have friends list and the other stuff we can ignore about. But it's all about how you set up your radio. With most people, most starters would set up something like this. You'll have your frequency. This is Ron Barway. Don't copy what I'm doing. This is dedicated for analog. There's another frequency dedicated for DMR. I have this as digital. For example, I have this on parrot, a receiving on slot 2. Your standard color code is 1. That includes repeaters and simplex as well in South Africa, and I think even worldwide in radio amateur to do with DMR. As I said, I set mine differently. You would usually set yours as simplex. I set mine as double slot, as I want to hear anything that's on there. It does come with its own advantage and disadvantage at the same time. What I did, I basically took out some filters, so I'm making it a bit less strict, so to speak. But that's to do with programming. It's a bit complicated. You could always ask for a code plug from a friend, see how they do it, but just remember that if you use someone other's code plug, there isn't really a point because it isn't personalized to you. And you might even struggle to figure out where's this and that. The nice thing about the DMR radios is your ability to customize. And I think that's a feature that a few people forget about. Next is hotspot setup. Um, so the hotspot is quite similar. It's similar to a PAN network, personalized area network. It can cover a small area. A hotspot only transmits about less than 500 milliwatts. In fact, I think it's 100 milliwatts. So you'll be using your radio on low power. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So I have my hotspot on the side. I'm going to go to my webcam. This is my hotspot over here. This is a bit overkill because I'm using a Pi 5. You don't require any power near that. A Pi 1 and a Pi 1 or 3 is even good enough. You don't need something insanely powerful, what I have. So here, so when you setting up your hotspot, you'll come across two OSs, operating systems. The current software that you can download is Raspberry, but do not confuse that from Pi-Star. or WSD, something like that. There's two OSs, mainly OSs available for a hotspot. When you're setting up your Pi Star, you'll be taking out the SD card, you'll be putting it into your computer, and you'll be burning an image to it. There's some tutorials about that, how to do that. I'm not going to quite cover that because that will take a bit of time to show how that works. So I'll just show you how to get in and that. Once you get that burnt in and you put your SD card in and power up your Raspberry Pi, um, have it connected to the network. Before you insert the SD card, you have to put in a image of your Wi-Fi password, or if you're lucky like me, if it has a LAN port, connect that to your network. And then you have to go onto your router to get the IP address. For example, this IP address is 168.3.23. That will be the IP address of the Pi, and it hosts a small website for you to change settings onto this. So once you get in, it will ask you to enter a passcode. Your username is PiStar, and the default password is Raspberry, no capitals. And once you get in, you go into a screen like this. You'll set up your device as a MMDVM host as a simplex node. Then you host name. If you want to change that, you can. If not, then that's fine. Then you add your call sign. For example, mine is ZU6 Kilo Echo Alpha. There's also sometimes there might be a DMR ID underneath that. You can put your long latitude and longitude on it, your town, country. This is, for example, if you're looking on the Brandmaster website, you could put your QRZ profile in there, your node type if it's for you. You select a private. If you have multiple people using it, you can set it to public. If you want APRS, such as sending your location to the APRS network, you enable that. And then the server, think Europe is a good option. Then with your dashboard access, this isn't so important, but the one thing is under remote access password. So if you want to set up a bit more secure, you can change the password to what you want it to be. You can't change the username, so it will be PyStar something something something. And if you have that set up, you apply the changes. So we'll stop the services and it will start initializing. So here, you know your call sign. Well, if you know it's working, once you get this up top here, this is to do with your top hat. So you would select, for example, DMR mode. You This isn't so important, but if you have a small OLED display with it, you can select that. If not, you select none, alongside a few other factors that are going to go down here. Actually, it's not even there. Try and think now, forgetting something here. I'm forgetting something quite important. But somewhere around here, there will be an option of selecting your top hat, unless they updated the firmware of it. Once you have that, oh, there we go. So over here at radio modem and types, you'll select your top hat over here. And there's a lot of top hats available. There's even some other options for duplex hats. So hats that can receive and transmit at the same time. That's quite useful if you like to talk on Talk Group 91 or worldwide, as that's quite busy, and then you're trying to exit out. So that could be quite useful. But that how you set it up. This is how the simple page you set it up. And once you select your top hat, I'm just going to choose a random hat for this example. After that, after you select the hat, you have some other options on DMR to choose. Yeah, so you have your DMR configuration. For South Africa, I think we use 6551 BM. DMR ESSID is, for example, if you have multiple hotspots and you want to separate them, you can give them a separate ID on it to separate them on Brandmaster. Color code, you will leave at 1, and then the rest you can ignore. You also have an option for adding a GPS if, for example, your hotspot is mobile and you want to add a GPS. Isn't something that I commonly see. It's actually something that's quite rare. I think I haven't seen a single user done that yet, but that is an option that you can use. And then after that, you can download the configuration. For this example, I'm going to go to my backup that I created before I restarted this. And while I wait for that, I'm going to explain a bit more further. You also get a few other options. You also have a power mode, so if you feel like something isn't right, you're not getting into it, you can also reset it remotely through the website it created. But it seems like this is taking a while. Not something
Keegan.
that, yes.
Maybe I can just add in here. Um, what Keegan is explaining here, if you buy your Pi and your hat separately, you need to do a setup from scratch. But you do get vendors that you can buy your hotspot from that's already preset with many of the settings that makes it easier for you.
Thanks, Albert. So, yes, with some vendors, they can also set it up for you. It's usually a step forward, easy method of doing it. Seems like my thing is stuck as it's probably loading all the information there. So I'm just going to go back to my PowerPoint. Let me check here. A few things that we did not cover. I didn't cover everything about private call, such as one of the examples is that you can alert your buddy privately, or you can listen to their own radio without them knowing. SMS, I've been explained fully about that, including roaming, ranging. Power save, I talked about a bit, and these are your options. So if I go back to your repeaters, you have a few DMR modes to choose from. You get mainly four, but you'll be mostly interested in the two, your simplex and your repeater. The repeater is strictly for repeater. If you try to use repeater on a crossband, it does not work. You have to use simplex mode on it. Or you could, if you want to use something advanced, you could use double slot. And for example, with my FSR radio, I use a time slot split. There's also a slot suit, and with your usually with your other radios, not amateur radio ones, not amateur DMR radio ones, you can get a I VoIP over RF. There's my references. I'll make a copy for available of some of the references I use and where I got some of this information. I also use some AI, so I have a AI declaration. The AI has been used to generate some images and a bit of text within this PowerPoint, and it's used for fact checking and some pointers such as fixes, issues, and spelling. I want to give big thanks for Warren for some suggestions, ideas, and editing. Albert ZS6 AHY really was a big help. A lot of suggestions, a lot of ideas, and also a big help at organizing this. Also want to give credit to Philip ZS6PVT for organizing the TikTok slot on the group, and also for ZS6HI for organizing the final TikTok and being with us. Also want to thank Sandton TikTok for making this happen. I think I fixed some people's confusions. And the nice part about this, you can ask me questions now. Or you could contact me at my school email. I'm all ears now.
Thank you very much, Keegan. That was very interesting. And yes, I saw Ray said he's got a lot to learn. Myself. Yeah, I thought I knew a little bit about DMR, but I obviously do not. So I'm just going to go through some of the information in the chat quickly, Keegan, and then
Okay.
we'll hand it and to see if there's any questions for you. So is Ronald ZR6 RVC has posted the DMR.za page on the MySARL site, as well as where you can get a list of all the repeaters and hotspots. So thank you very much for that, Ronald. Stuart has indicated ZR1 Whiskey Tango that he uses a Pi Zero for his DMR hotspot. And I must say, Stuart's got the most amazing audio on everything. So well done to Stuart on that one. I've never used a Pi Zero in my life or a Pi in my life. And Ray is saying many thanks, Keegan. Mark, I see you've got your hand up. Please go ahead for Keegan.
Yes, thank you, Keith. Keegan, hi, it's Mark here, ZU06 Alpha Mike Foxtrot. Thank you very, very much for this presentation. I echo what a lot of people have said there. We've got a lot to learn. You think to yourself, you've learned a lot of technology, and all of a sudden something new comes along and that you're completely flawed on. But thank you very much for that. I wanted to know if is there a possibility you could perhaps put a link or a reference as to where a person can actually buy components specifically for the Pi Zero, like for example the MMDVM hat, or even maybe a complete Pi hotspot kit that one can actually make? That's the first question. And the second one I wanted to ask is, for a person who is just recently starting or looking to go into DMR, what would be the best, or what would be the best and cheapest handset to use for a DMR work? Thank you.
Maybe this is more a question for me. If you don't mind, Keegan.
I don't mind at all.
Okay, so regarding, there is a couple of vendors. Well, basically, I think there's 3 or 4 vendors in South Africa where you can buy a hotspot. Just like many other people, when I got a hotspot, that was the first time I've used a Pi. Before that, I've only eaten them. But you can get it from, I think Ronald has it, Dirk in Cape Town. There was somebody else that I forgot. From myself, I also have stock. So there's a couple of us that do sell it, already made up. When it comes to the radio, there are a few options. You can go very much entry level, and probably you can go like Baofeng DM32. I think it sells locally for around 2000. It is basically in physical form a copy of a Motorola. On the inside, not as much. It does have quite a lot of features still. CPS is a bit clunky. It does have a bit of firmware issues, but it does the job. So next up on your list is probably a Anytone D168. It's way, way smaller. It's a very small radio, more just voice orientated. But the quality of Anytone is way better than a Baofeng. And then you go to the radios that Keegan has. Handheld wise, the new Anytone D890. So you've got active GPS, APRS, Bluetooth, all the bells and whistles. And a mobile version he had there was the D578. I think that puts out about 50 or 55 watts on VHF. And also, just as a side note, we are talking here DMR radios, but for amateurs, all DMR radios is also analog radios. So you basically got two for the price of one, if I can put it that way. So that's basically your options, and I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Albert. Okay, does anybody, I see that Ronald has posted a link in the chat as well. Thank you very much for that, Ronald. Does anybody have any other questions? If you do, please just unmute. Nigel, ZS6RN, please go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. Do you copy? Have you got copy there on audio? Yes, you have. I'm just still fighting the vagaries of Mac and Zoom. With radios, there is another option as well, which I don't see very many of, and that's the Alinco. They've got a number of Alinco DMR based radios, which are dual mode, dual band, and that may be worth having a look at if you'd like to go for something different, as shall I say. Not going to punt it, it's what I'm using, but Alinco has got quite good reviews overseas. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. I see there's a couple of other posts, including Albert has posted a link in the chat for those interested as well. Anybody else want to ask Keegan any questions? If you do, please just unmute and ask away or raise your hand, whichever comes easiest.
All right.
Stuart,
Good
please.
evening. Keegan, it's Stuart here, 01WT, or maybe this is a question for Albert. I set up my Anytone a year or two ago, and I needed a driver then on my PC in order to connect the programming cable. Now that I've got a new PC all configured, I'm looking for this driver, and I've searched, I've Googled, I just cannot find a link that works. So my question is, do we still need a driver in this day and age? And if so, where do I get it from? If you could post the link for me in the chat.
The short answer is no, you don't need it. It should find itself. Windows 11 can be temperamental at some point, but I've never had that issues. I know it's a bit more temperamental with the older Anytone 878, but the new 890 and 168 and 578, there's usually not an issue. You just plug and play and go. I've had one issue where actually, was it ZS6A2Z helped another ham because they had to clear the cache or something in the background in the system and uninstall all the drivers because it wasn't a driver issue, it seems. It was that Windows was getting confused with what driver to use. It had the correct driver, it wasn't sure what to do. So if you have a problem, send me a chat on my WhatsApp. I think, Stuart, you do have my number. And then we can just see if push you in the right direction or just help.
Okay, good. Thanks, Albert. I'll try that out because I've got the older one, the 878. So maybe because I used to have to need a driver, so I thought I might need it nowadays. Anyway, I will try it and then I'll get all of you if I don't come right. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Stuart. Has anybody else got any questions for Keegan? Okay, just a few observations, Keegan, from myself, which I jotted down during your presentation. So that built-in call log, I find that very handy. I love the logbooks where it automatically wakes up and tells you the person's name and call sign. And when you're getting to my age and you don't remember everyone's name against their call sign, that's very handy. Then 655, I get that's for the entire South African region as a prefix. You mentioned SMS. I'm sure WhatsApp's on the horizon. I'm just thinking aloud here. Then the MB2 vocoder. I've always found the audio on DMR a little bit like difficult for my ears, at least, to hear. So maybe I've just got to do an upgrade on that MB2 vocoder. But that sounded interesting as well. Color codes I still haven't got, but we'll talk about that later. And then the DMR repeater trying to automatically route traffic and optimize to the multi-user on it. That's fascinating as well. I wasn't familiar with data slot 1 and voice on slot 2 in South Africa, so that's quite interesting too. And the registration ID, I'm assuming that there's no cost for that, Keegan, if you register for a DMR ID.
Yes, that's
Or is-
correct. Yes,
Okay.
that's correct. You don't really need to pay anything for that. I think if you want more IDs, I don't take my word up to this, but for example, with some of these radios, you have another function, a kill function, so someone takes a call that. If you're afraid of them using that, you could pay for more IDs, so you can have, well, the same radio, but radios with different IDs. But that's a paid thing. You get for free one ID per call sign. But that's what I know so far.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Keegan. I see Ronald just didn't be careful of private calls on DMR ZA. It will hog the repeater network, so be careful of using that. Okay, cool. Then I know that you spoke about the code plug, and I assume that's the programming. I think Albert mentioned CPS, and that's the PC-based software where you start compiling your code plug, if I understand correctly there, Albert.
Yes, so the CPS is basically your PC software. CodePlug, and I don't know where this come from. It's where the term started. I assume it's a Motorola term, but that's what most of us use as a term for the software where you build your, and is really a build, like Keegan explained. You building your program basically as you have channels and zones, etc. But yeah, CPS is your software. Code plug is basically what we use as a generic term to just explain what you are the file you're uploading to your radio.
Thank you very much. Yeah, then you mentioned quite a lot of things like Brandmeister and taking over from the original Motorola group and private calls, which I found it quite interesting as well. The roaming feature sounds fascinating if you're driving around and it's automatically roaming for you, finding the strongest repeater. That's pretty awesome. Obviously, you went into some detail on the hotspot, and I was fascinated by the ability for digital signal to get through down to, I think it was 100 minus 116 dB. So that's phenomenally strong for it to be able to get that signal through a lot of noise. And then obviously the Pi. Just before we close, are there any usage protocols or conventions that a person operating DMR should adhere to?
I wouldn't, sorry, let me interject here. I wouldn't say so. My way I'm doing, I just use it as a normal um, analog radio, meaning the way I talk and just saying ZS is Alpha Hotel Yankee if I'm mobile, etc. So nothing different.
Okay. Oh, that makes it easier. Thank you, Albert. Otherwise, I've got to learn a whole new set of Q codes. Okay, so at this point in time, on behalf of the center of the amateur radio community in South Africa, Keegan, I would like to say a very, very big thank you from us to you for the time you've taken to prepare this presentation and for your time tonight with Albert to provide this information to us. At this point in time, I'd like to hand over to Albert for a close. Albert, all yours.
Thank you, Keith. And my first thank you goes to Keegan to putting in the work for this presentation and coming onto this platform with all our elders as a youngster and doing this presentation. I think, Mark, from your question about radios and the cost, and I think we are here not to want to take DMR, say this is the beginning and ending of radio. There is a platform for all modes to be used. For me personally, I see DMR, and for youngsters, I see DMR as an entry level to ham radio. It is more funky, it is more techy than maybe HF. And I see this as an entry level or an entry gate to the bigger ham radio that's out there in all its facets, as it is probably these days not as expensive to get a good setup for DMR. And it opens up, even though it may be controversial using internet for some operators, but it opens up for a youngster. It does open up the world to chat on Talk Group 91, which is the worldwide group, and they can chat away, and it is small and compact, and they can take it everywhere and anywhere they do. And most people have internet wherever they go. And on the opposite side, I also see it as an exit from amateur radio for maybe a senior ham that can't set up a HF rig anymore, is staying in an environment with family or in a smaller place where HF antenna is not possible or a rig is not possible, and they still want to make contacts and chat and be active and verbal around the world. This is also a good way, in my opinion, to still do this. So this is not, we didn't, or I believe Keegan and I didn't do this presentation to say DMR is better than others. Other modes of operation is just something else and maybe fits into your life in the future in a different way. As our situations and our life change, this may not work for you now, but it may work for you in the future. And it's just a nice way to also communicate. And thank you for the club for the opportunity. And yeah, we were about 30 odd people tonight. And I think it was a good presentation. Thank you very much, Keegan.
Thank you very much, Albert. Thank you very much, Keegan. And just an aside, Keegan, you triggered a thought now. I'll eventually be able to talk to Dick, ZS6 Bravo Uniform November, who uses D-Star via my DMR radio. Now I've got to work out how to do that, but Dick, I'm coming for you. I think with that, everybody, I would like to thank you very much for your time this evening, and especially to our speakers, Keegan, and supported by Albert, and for all those who've contributed to the discussion this evening and posted things in the chat for us. And I see Keegan is very open. He's provided contact details. We will be posting the video on the YouTube channel so that you will be able to go and get those details if you've missed them during the presentation. But that brings us to an end, everybody, and I'd like to bid you all a 7-3. And don't forget that we have the upcoming Tech Talks at the end of April on top band and at the end of May on end-fed half-wave antennas. Thank you, everybody, and good night.